welcome back to my channel, students. So this is Tulika Sengupta and you are listening Easy Audiobook. So today I will be narrating your chapter 7 Birth, written by A.J. Cronin from your book Snapshot Class 11. Before starting the chapter, we have something. In this excerpt from the Citadel, Andrew Mansion, newly out of medical school, has just begun his medical practice as an assistant of Dr. Edward Page in the small Welsh mining town of Blenheim. As he is returning from a disappointing evening with Christine, the girl he loves, he is met by Joe Morgan. Joe and his wife, who have been married nearly 20 years, are expecting their first child. Though it was nearly midnight when Andrew reached Byron Gower, he found Joe Morgan waiting for him, walking up and down with short steps between the closed surgery and the entrance of the house. At the sight of him, the burly driller's face expressed relief. "Hey, doctor, I'm glad to see you. I have been back and forward here for this last hour. The missus wants ye. Before time, too." Andrew abruptly recalled from the contemplation of his own affair, told Morgan to wait. He went into the house for his bag. Then together they set out for number 12 Blaina Terrace. The night air was cool and deep, with quite mystery. Usually so perceptive, Andrew now felt dull and listless. He had no premonition that this night would prove unusual, still less that it would influence his whole future in Blenheim. The two men walked in silence until they reached the door of number 12. Then Joe drew up short. "I will not come in," he said, and his voice showed sign of strain. "But man, I know you will do well for us." Inside, a narrow stair led up to a small bedroom, clean but poorly furnished and lit only by an oil lamp. Here Mrs. Morgan's mother, a tall grey-haired woman of nearly 70, and the stout elderly midwife waited beside the patient, watching Andrew's expression as he moved about the room. "Let me make you a cup of tea, doctor," Butch said the former quickly. After a few moments, Andrew smiled faintly. He saw that the old woman, wise is experience, realized there must be a period of waiting, that she was afraid he would leave the case, saying he would return later. "Don't fret, mother. I will not run away." Down in the kitchen, he drank the tea which she gave him. Overwrought as he was, he knew he could not snatch even an hour's sleep if he went home. He knew too that the case here would demand all his attention. A queer lethargy of spirit came upon him. He decided to remain until everything was over. An hour later, he went upstairs again, noted the progress made, came down once more, sat by the kitchen fire. It was still, except for the rustless of a cinder in the grate and the slow tick-tock of the wall clock. No, there was another sound, the beat of Morgan's footsteps as he paced in the street outside. The old woman opposite him sat in her black dress, quite motionless, her eyes strangely alive and wise, probing never leaving his face. His thoughts were heavy, muddled. The episode he had witnessed at Cardiff Station still obsessed him morbidly. He thought of Bramwell, foolishly devoted to a woman who deceived him sordidly, of Edward Page, bound to the Shrevish Blodwen of Denny, living unhappily apart from his wife. His reason told him that all these marriages were dismal failures. It was a conclusion which, in his present state, made him wince. He wished to consider marriage as an idyllic state. Yes, he could not otherwise consider it with the image of Christine before him. Her eyes, shining towards him, admitted no other conclusion. It was the conflict between his level, doubting mind and his overflowing heart which left him resentful and confused. He let his chin sink upon his chest, stretched out his legs, started broodingly into the fire. He remained like this so long, and his thoughts were so filled with Christine that he started when the old woman opposite suddenly addressed him. Her meditation has pursued a different course. Suzanne said not to give her the chloroform if it would harm the baby. She's awful set upon this child. Doctor, Butcha, her old eyes warmed at a sudden thought. She added in a low tone, we all are, I fancy. He collected himself with an effort. I won't do any harm. The anesthetic, he said kindly, they will be all right. Here's the nurse's voice was heard calling from the top landing. Andrew glanced at the clock, which now showed 3:30. He rose and went up to the bedroom. He perceived that he might now begin his work. An hour elapsed. It was a long, harsh struggle. Then, as the first strike of dawn strayed past the broken edge of the blind, the child was born, lifeless. As he gazed at the still form, a shiver of horror passed over Andrew. After all that he had promised, his face heated up with his own exertion, chilled suddenly. He hesitated, torn between his desire to attempt to resuscitate the child and his obligations toward the mother, who was herself in a desperate state. The dilemma was so urgent he did not solve it consciously. Blindly, instinctively, he gave the child to the nurse and turned his attention to Suzanne Morgan, who now lay collapsed, almost pulseless and not yet out of the ether. Upon her side, his hassle was desperate, a frantic race against her ebbing strength. It took him only an instant to smash a glass ampoule and inject the medicine. Then he flung down the hypodermic syringe and worked unsprangly to restore the flaccid woman. After a few moments of feverish effort, her heart strengthened. He saw that he might safely leave her. He swung round in his shirt sleeves, his hair sticking to his damp brow. Where's the child? The midwife made a frightened gesture. She had placed it beneath the bed. In a flash, Andrew kneeled down, fishing amongst the sodden newspaper below the bed. He pulled out the child, a boy perfectly formed. The limp, warm body was white and soft as tallow. The cord, hesitantly slashed, lay like a broken stem. The skin was of a lovely texture, smooth and tender. The head lowered on the thin neck. The limbs seemed boneless. Still kneeling, Andrew stared at the child with a haggard frown. The witness meant only one thing: aphasia pallida, and his mind, unnaturally tense, raced back to a case he once had seen in Samaritan, to the treatment that had been used. Instantly he was on his feet. Get me hot water and cold water. He threw out to the nurse, and basins too. Quick, quick! But doctor, she faltered, her eyes on the pallid body of the child. Quick! He shouted. Snatching a blanket, he laid the child upon it and began the special method of respiration. The basing around the big iron kettle. Frantically, he splashed cold water into one basin. Into the other, he mixed water as hot as his hand could bear. Then, like some crazy juggler, he hurried the child between the two, now plunging it into the ice, now into the steaming bath. 15 minutes passed. Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him. One of his sleeves hung down, dripping. His breath came pantingly, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. The desperate sense of defeat pressed on him, a racking hopelessness. He felt the midwife watching him in stark consternation, while there, pressed back against the wall where she had all the time remained, her hand pressed to her throat, uttering no sound, her eyes burning upon him, was the old woman. He remembered her longing for a grandchild as great as had been her daughter's longing for the child. All dashed away now, futile, beyond remedy. The flower was new and draggled mess. Stumbling over a souping towel, Andrew almost dropped the child, which was now wet and slippery to his hand, like a strange white fish. Now, mercy's sake, doctor, rimmed the midwife. It's stillborn. Andrew did not heed her. Bitten, despairing, having labored in vain for half an hour, he still persisted in one last effort, rubbing the child with a rough towel, crushing and releasing the little chest and with both his hands, trying to get breathe into the limp body. And then, as by a miracle, the pygmy chest which his hands enclosed gave a short, convulsive heave, another and another. And you turned giddy, the sense of life springing beneath his fingers after all the unveiling striving was so exquisite it almost made him faint. He redoubled his effort feverishly. The child was gasping now, deeper and deeper. A bubble of mucus came from one tiny nostril, a joyful, iridescent bubble. The limbs were no longer boneless. The head was no longer by back spineless. The blanched skin was slowly turning pink. Then exquisitely came the child's cry. Dear Father in heaven, the nurse sobbed hysterically. It's came alive, it come alive, it's come alive. Andrew handed her the child. He felt weak and dazzled. About him, the room lay in a shuddering litter. Blankets, towels, basins, soiled instruments, the hypodermic syringe impaled by its point in the linoleum, the ear knocked over, the kettle on its side in the puddle of water. Upon the huddled bed, the mother still dreaming her way quietly through the anesthetic. The old woman still stood against the wall, but her hands were together. Her lips moved without sound. She was praying. Mechanically, Andrew wrung out his sleeves, pulled on his jacket. I'll fetch my bag later, nurse. He went downstairs through the kitchen into the scullery. His lips were dry. At the scullery, he took a long drink of water. He reached for his hat and coat. Outside, he found Joe standing on the pavement with a tense, expectant face. All right, Joe, he said thickly. Both all right. It was quite light, nearly 5 o'clock. A few miners were already in the street, the first of the night shift moving out. As Andrew walked with them, spent all night shift moving out, spent and slow, his footfalls echoing with the other under the morning sky. He kept thinking blindly, obviously, to all other works he had done in blindly. I have done something. Oh God, I have done something real at last. Oh my God. So this was your whole chapter. If you like the style of my narration, please do like, share and subscribe my video. And that's all for today. Thank you very much. And in a quite few days, when I complete the narrating, I will definitely start explaining these chapters in Hindi as well. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.